Welcome to the D-Minus Diaries, Episode 17, The Walt Rule, Maxim Part 3. On Missed Dives, Second Chances, and Leaving the Driveway by Jim Jones. We hope you enjoy this podcast while you drive, ride, roam, or drone. Have you ever zigged when you should have zagged, turned left when you should have turned right, or stood in the exact spot where the winning lottery ticket was sold but didn't play that day? I've done all of those. Sometimes those moments become funny stories. Sometimes they become regrets. And sometimes, if you're paying attention, they become rules. This one starts with a bicycle ride through Washington, D.C., the day after the world changed. I had retired from the Army in 2000 and was working for a telecommunications company. The morning after 9/11, I rode my bike past the Pentagon while smoke still rose from the building. National Guard troops stood watch, looking as uncertain as the rest of us felt. At the Jefferson Memorial, a park ranger held a shotgun like it was both a tool and a question mark. I asked her what she was supposed to do. She said she didn't know. She had been told to shoot if any more planes came. That was strategic space, the government doing something so people could feel like something was being done. It reminded me of hiding under desks in school as if a wooden top could stop an atomic blast. I pedaled through empty streets and silent buildings, circling the National Mall, feeling utterly helpless. Near the Washington Monument, I met a woman from Colorado who had saved her whole life for that trip. Everything was closed, flights grounded, no way home. I had trained my whole life to defend America, yet there I sat beside her, equally powerless. Life can change in a flash. One day you are prepared for anything. The next day, you are sitting on a bench realizing that preparation does not equal control. That wasn't the first time I learned that control is an illusion. Everyone remembers that time for different reasons. For me, it was another moment of helplessness and a thirst to do more. One thing my dad somehow taught me was to take opportunities when they presented themselves. I have spent a lifetime collecting rules and strategies to get through life. Most are simple. Over time, they proved themselves useful. But the rule that changed everything came from a missed dive. A few months after that bike ride, I was asked to return to the Army's Special Operations Command. I immediately said yes. It took a while to complete the hiring process. When I returned to Fort Bragg in 2003, life felt like it was shrinking. My mom had passed away. My son had joined the Army. The world I knew was shifting. Special Operations has its own culture. Reputation matters more than rank. First names are common. We're not exactly standard-issue soldiers, and we have a good time proving why that works. After a year, I took a promotion and moved to a new section. My new cube buddy, Mark, a retired Halo team sergeant and one of the smartest guys I've ever met, invited me to a Friday lunch group at Hooters. That's where I met Walter Minton, a retired Green Beret and the combat developer for the M4 carbine, and later Rick, a Halo team sergeant still on active duty. Fridays became sacred. We gamed punch cards and calendars to eat almost free. While others play fantasy football, we played fantasy lottery when jackpots hit ridiculous numbers and planned ridiculous futures. Mark wanted a house with a moat so he could swim laps and a tiki hut with someone handing him drinks when he finished. Rick, the Dave Ramsey disciple, wanted a newer used car. I wanted a cabin on a lake and someone to keep the boat ready when I felt like using it. We agreed we would pay our imaginary employees $80,000 a year plus benefits because when you have ridiculous amounts of money, you can do stuff like that. It was nonsense. It was therapy. It was friendship. And Walt always asked me to go scuba diving. Every week, for years. And every week I had a reason to say no. Yard work, movies, timing. The 1,000 tiny excuses that dress up like responsibility. One day Mark called. We talked for a minute before he casually said, "Oh, Walt was killed last night." I told him that seemed like something you would lead with. He didn't answer. Walt's car went off the road, flipped into a ditch, and filled with water. My 6'3" Green Beret scuba diving friend drowned upside down in a few inches of water. Just like that, the invitation stopped. Walt and I would never go diving together. 9/11 had brought me back to a community I loved, and Walt's death was the first crack in the new family I had found there. After the funeral, I told my wife I had a new rule. She asked what it was. I told her I would never get to go scuba diving with Walt, so from that day forward, if someone asked me to do something, go somewhere, or share an experience and I could, I would. I started calling it the Walt rule, even if it meant pushing off chores, honey-do lists, or hundreds of reasons life throws in our way, because you never know if or when that opportunity will come again. The first time I used the rule, my friend Steve asked me to go to Daytona for Biketoberfest. I never would have gone otherwise. It turned into riding, new bikes, a trip to the Kennedy Space Center, and getting to know a friend a little better. After taking a creative writing class, my instructor suggested I write. I told her I don't know what to write about. She asked me what I like to do. I said, I like motorcycling. She introduced me to Bill, who owns a newspaper called the Up-and-Coming Weekly in Fayetteville, North Carolina, because he was a big motorcycle rider. That took me down my writing path and opened many doors. Bill asked me to go to Sturgis, South Dakota for the 75th Motorcycle Rally. It was going to be a 4,000-mile trip. I was nervous, but I said yes. I don't own a Harley. I went anyway. 5 trips later, I've logged thousands of miles and gained lifelong friends. It is estimated that over 740,000 people were there. While most people wear leather and tattoos, I show up on a BMW motorcycle wearing zippy pants with a fanny pack. Easy to spot. Later, I went to my first off-road motorcycle rally. I had never been off-road, but wanted something new in my life. That night, I ran into one of the old operations officers from one of our units. It had been about 15 years since I saw Rick, and we had dinner that night. He told me about his travels and asked me if I would be interested in riding the Transamerica Trail, a 5,000-mile off-road route from Tennessee to Oregon, with him, and he talked about wanting to ride to the Arctic Circle, exactly the kind of things I once would have talked myself out of. I applied the Walt rule and said yes. The next day, we rode together and I wrecked 4 times on rock and mud. Since that dinner, we've ridden half the trail and made it to the Arctic Circle. I have pictures of muddy bikes, tired faces, and the quiet satisfaction that only comes from being sore in every joint and still glad you went. A few years back, our friend Bob, one of the Sturgis boys, turned 80. His wife called and asked a few of us to be his birthday surprise. When we rode into his driveway, he looked like a kid caught doing something wrong. Then his eyes filled with tears and he hugged us like long-lost brothers. Sometimes saying yes isn't about the trip, it's about showing up. Regret rarely shouts, it whispers. It sounds like, I'll go next time, when things slow down, or maybe next year. Time hears those whispers and keeps walking. The Walt rule is not about saying yes to everything. It is about recognizing the difference between opportunity and avoidance, between true limits and comfortable excuses. Because one day the invitations stop, not dramatically, not with a warning, just quietly like a phone that never rings again. Life is a trail of zigs and zags. Some we choose, some choose us. A missed dive became a rule became a road became a life filled with people I would never have met if I had stayed home. As for my Hooters crew, Mark and Rick have both passed. D- does not count up, it counts down. We do not know how many invitations we have left. So when someone asks you to go and you can go, you may find a trail, you may find a friend, you may find a version of yourself that only exists on the other side of yes. As I'm writing this, I'm sitting at the BMW shop getting my bike serviced. I was invited to ride to Key West with some friends, and using the Walt rule, I said sure. I don't think of myself as a world traveler or much of anything for that matter, but when people hear about some of my trips, I often hear the same thing. I want to do that someday. When I ask why they haven't, they offer the same excuses I used before the rule. Sometimes they ask what the hardest part of a trip is. I usually give the same answer. Leaving the driveway. I'm sure I don't have all the answers on this. How do you decide when to say yes? Leave a thought in the comments so we can learn from each other. Have a safe journey. Jim, D- Jones.